en un lugar de La Mancha, de cuyo nombre no quiero acordarme.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good
Aujourd'hui,
fortune
maman est
must
morte. Ou peut-être hier, je ne sais pas.
Well, we'll move right ahead with a program with a bit of code. 5 YFN, 5 years from now. What will we see in the audio industry over the next, or the end, until the end of this decade? Presented by Tom Webster. Tom is a partner at Sounds Profitable, the leading voice of significance for the digital audio industry, devoted to audio insights, education, and connections. Tom has been a co-author and driver behind some of audio's most influential studies, including the Infinite Dial series, Share of Ear, and the podcast landscape. He has additionally led hundreds of audience research projects on 6 continents for some of the most listened to podcast and syndicated radio shows in the world. Tom Webster was recently inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Thank you. What he did not mention is that I'm also the host of a comedy podcast, which is me giving this exact speech in Spanish, which you can check that out later. Well, I have some bad news for you. First, I'm not doing that, and second, I have to talk a little bit about video today. And I know this is an audio conference, and I've devoted my life to audio, but I have to do it. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. As Chris mentioned, I'm a partner at Sounds Profitable. We are the trade association for the podcast industry now. We have about 200 partners, basically industry players, publishers, ad tech agencies, all on down the line. And I myself have been in podcasting. This is the start of my 20th year in podcasting, believe it or not. I know, I look like such a baby. How can he be that old, you ask? But it's true. But before that, I did a lot of work in all aspects of audio. In fact, I first met Amanda doing the research for the Audio Publishers Association, which I did for about 10 years back in the States. So I spent a lot of time in the world of audiobooks, the world of audio, certainly the world of radio, and now I'm in podcasting. And there are a lot of things in common between audiobooks and audio publishing and podcasting. And among those things, I think, are some of the opportunities and also some of the challenges that I think both industries are going to have in the coming years, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. But I do want to start off with a little bit of research, and this is from a study that we published several months ago called The Podcast Landscape. It's the largest study of podcasting in America. It's a study of a little over 5,000 Americans, 18 plus. We asked them all kinds of questions about their audio consumption habits, including podcasting and audiobooks, which I'll show you in just a moment. First thing to note is that podcasting in America is now a majority activity. If you add together the 2 slices on the right in the past week and the past 30 days, that's 53% of Americans say that they have listened to a podcast at least in the last month. So it's a majority activity, it's a majority behavior. It's grown a little bit every year, really, since I've been tracking this. First started tracking this back in 2006. And it's been growing a little bit every year. It's never had the exponential growth that video has had, but it's certainly never stopped growing and continues to grow, largely because of video. And video podcasting has certainly been at the forefront of podcasting in the podcast industry for the past couple of years now. We also, as I mentioned, asked about audiobooks. The total population of the U.S., 20% say they've listened to an audiobook in the last month. Amongst podcast listeners, that's 28%. I don't know if this is a laser or not. It does not, so I'm not going to shoot the screen with lasers. But 28% of podcast consumers also listen to audiobooks. And I'm maybe mildly surprised that wasn't a little bit higher, but I think that says more about where podcasting is than where audiobooks are. And I think that has as much to do with so much of the recent growth in podcasting, again, being down to video podcasting. And a lot of the largest recent shows in podcasting have really been YouTube driven. Amongst audiobook consumers, 60% have listened to a podcast in the last week, another 16% in the past 30 days. So there's certainly a tremendous amount of overlap and intersect between the podcast listening audience and the audiobook consumer. Again, 60% of audiobook consumers listen to a podcast in the last week. That's pretty high, significantly higher than the population in general, which, as I showed you before, was 37%. So there are a lot of audiobook consumers listening to podcasts. And this is roughly what that landscape looks like, right? The podcast consumer, it's a larger landscape than the audiobook consumer, but there is a fair amount of overlap with a lot of audiobook consumers listening to podcasts, and vice versa. Now, what I wanted to do here today is take a look at the two extremes of podcast consumption. The people who say that they mostly listen, and the people who say they mostly watch. Because again, video has really surged in terms of popularity, especially with some of the newest shows. But the first thing to point out here, this question, what percentage, if any, of the podcasts you consume are on video? If you look on the right, that large orange slice, that's almost half, say less than 25%. So podcasting still is primarily an audio entertainment. The dominant modality of podcasting is audio. The percentage who say 75% or more is video is only 14%, right? So even though video has made a lot of noise in podcasting, most people mostly listen. And that continues to be true, even as some of the biggest new recent hits in podcasting have been driven by video. The average podcast listener is a listener, and I think that remains key to this day. I wanted to take a look at the two extremes of this, the people who mostly listen and the people who mostly watch. And we're going to call them audio primes and video primes. And again, there are a lot more audio primes than there are video primes. But the video primes are consuming a lot more content. That's a key distinction to make here. What's different about them? Not as much as you might think. In terms of male-female balance, they're really the same. They're really the same. Podcasting is, at least amongst habitual listeners, slightly more male than female, continues to be. When I first started tracking podcasting, it was almost 75% men to 25% women. So that has certainly changed a lot over the past 19 or 20 years. But gender-wise, there's very little difference between audio primes and video primes. There's also very little difference in age. They're about the same age. So as far as the humans go, they roughly look alike. But they do have different behaviors, again, largely driven by something that is not necessarily related to video. But I will get to that in just a moment. When you ask the video primes what are their top sources of video media consumption, you see some really high numbers here for premium streaming TV, free ad-supported TV, and TikTok. Over half say that they have consumed TikTok in the last month. That's with video primes. With audio primes, it's kind of the same. So even though the audio primes are mainly listening to podcasts, they are as active a consumer of video as the video prime is. These numbers are all largely the same. They may be off by a percentage or two, right? So the audio prime and the video prime, they're both watching a lot of the same content. What are they spending more time with? And again, the story here is one of what they have in common and not what makes them different. What are audio primes spending more time with? The top answer, YouTube, 52%. Video primes also YouTube, Instagram, free streaming music, free streaming TV with ads, and TikTok. 4 of the top 5 with audio primes are video platforms led here by YouTube. So there is no question that the audio prime, the person who says that they listen to most of their podcasts, they are very much a video consumer. They are spending a lot of time with video screens. In fact, YouTube is generally the screen that is in front of them. This is what audiobook consumers say. What are they spending more time with? YouTube, TikTok, and podcasts. Fairly close there. But again, audiobook consumers, that slice of podcast consumers, again, that are also listening to audiobooks, they're telling us what they're spending more time with. They're spending more time with video platforms. Now, this does not mean that we have to somehow magically turn all of our audiobooks into videos. This would be difficult and potentially stupid. But it does tell us that this is the screen that is in front of people, and we have to confront that reality. We have to confront the reality that people have that screen in front of them, and if we want to reach them, we need to find ways to reach them on that screen, even if eventually we hope to reach them through their earballs, which is where I think most of us want to live. And here's why all of this is important. We asked video primes and audio primes, how did you discover your favorite podcast? For video primes, it should not surprise you. The top answer here, 66% say they discovered their favorite podcast on YouTube specifically, followed by searching the internet and then Instagram. Searching the internet, by the way, this often gets misinterpreted by people as searching for a particular topic and then finding a podcast. It's often searching for a celebrity or an influencer or somebody that they know and then finding their podcast in that way. They're already looking for it. It's a utility. But number one with video primes is YouTube. Can anybody guess what the number one source of discovery for podcasting is with audio primes? You are correct, all of you that said YouTube, and I think you all said it. You are all correct and lovely people. Correct, YouTube, even with the audio primes, by far the number one source of discovery for people's favorite podcast, even if this group of humans listens to that podcast more than watch it. And they can listen to it on YouTube. They can listen to it on YouTube Music. They can listen to it with in another tab on their browser. They can listen to it on YouTube with the app in the background, right? It does not require actively looking at a screen. But this is where discovery is happening. Discovery is an issue. Discovery is an issue in podcasting. Discovery is an issue for audiobooks. And this is where discovery is happening. This is what audiobook consumers tell us. They also found their favorite podcast on YouTube, followed by Spotify and then search. So YouTube is significant here. And what I would suggest to you is not to get hung up on video per se. And a lot of the discussion in podcasting is about video. We need to be on video. What I would suggest is it's more than likely about YouTube specifically than it is about video. It is about YouTube, the app. It is about how easy the app YouTube is to discover new content. That's what we're really talking about here. When you ask people, compared to listening to a podcast on an audio-only service, is using YouTube a better or worse experience? Overwhelmingly, the people who have done this say it's a better experience. Now, I'm not here to do an advertisement for YouTube. I'm an audio person. I do not like that I have to talk about this, believe me. Yet I must, because I'm paid so well to do so. Why is using YouTube for podcasts better than using an audio service? And I've highlighted 4 of the top 5 answers here. YouTube is where I consume other content. It is the screen in front of them. It is the screen in front of them. But the other ones here, it's easier to use. There's more engagement with hosts and creators on YouTube. YouTube has comments. I would submit that those are all very important aspects. They're all very germane to what we are talking about here. They make what could be just an audio experience come alive a little bit better because of the comments, because people feel like they are being seen. People feel like they're being heard and noticed. People are able, in many cases, to interact with the creator, to interact with the host of the podcast or the host of the show. And that is something that is lacking on audio-only apps. So really what I'm suggesting here is not so much that video is where we all need to be. It's that the audio-only apps in podcasting have kind of let us down. They're not great compared to the experience that you have on YouTube, where it's very easy to find content. You're very likely to find exactly what you're looking for. You're going to see visually a representation of what you were searching for, right? I think there's a big difference in podcast apps when you search for a term or maybe a guest or a host. The visual that you get back is the same visual for every episode of that podcast. It's the podcast art, right? The art for that show. When you look on YouTube, if you're looking for a specific person, you're going to get a picture of that person talking into a microphone. That's what I want, right? You're going to find what it is you were looking for. You're going to be able to share it much more easily, and you're going to be able to interact with other humans, potentially the creator, in the comments section. That's what's going on here. So it's not just about video, but it is about YouTube, and it is about discovery. How easy or difficult was it for you to find the last podcast that you discovered? Audio Primes, 31% said very easy. Video Primes, 41% said very easy. It is easier to discover content. It is easier to discover content. And as a result, they're more likely to say that they have discovered a new podcast in the last month. We also know that they are more likely to be heavy consumers of not just podcasts, but all media. The average for podcast listening in America is about 6 hours a week for weekly podcast consumers. It's closer to 9 with the Video Prime. They're also listening to more genres, more types of podcasts, right? It is easier for them to discover content. So what I am suggesting to you all of us here in the audio business, is that we have to find a way to confront that. That does not mean converting our content to video. And in particular with scripted content, audio fiction, audio drama, that is not what people are looking for on YouTube. When we ask people, how do they know what they are seeing on YouTube is a podcast? Their answers are overwhelmingly format related. It's a chat show. They see microphones. They see a studio. They see people talking or monologuing. That's what they're considering a podcast. It's not necessarily the strict technical definition of a podcast, but we have lost this battle a long time ago, right? So what people are terming a podcast on YouTube is really a chat show. If they see microphones, if they see a studio, they're taking that as a podcast. They're not necessarily thinking about audio fiction or audio drama. In fact, those are very, very low on the list. So we're not looking for video versions of audiobooks, but we are looking to interact with the creators. We are looking to interact with the hosts. We are looking to have a dialogue, potentially with authors, but certainly with fans of their work. And those are the things that are possible on a platform like YouTube that are not currently on a lot of podcast apps. So this is the reality that I think we all have to confront. You don't need a video version of your content, but I think you do need a video strategy. You do need specifically a YouTube strategy to aid discovery. And frankly, this is why all of this is important to me. The central question that Javier asked me when he invited me to speak here was, where do you see podcasting going in 5 years? I'm not a forecaster. I'd be bad at my real job if I did that. My job is to talk about what is. But what concerns me is interest in audio overall. Certainly in the United States, the commercial broadcast radio market has been in decline. It's been in decline for the last 15 years, right? So you have a whole generation of people who are growing up not listening to the radio necessarily. They're getting music potentially through Spotify, they're getting music through YouTube and other sources. But the audio gene is not something that is guaranteed at birth, right? So what concerns me, I wouldn't say I'm super worried about it, but I do think we need to talk about it, is getting the audio habit instilled in people everywhere that we can by talking about the benefits of audio, talking about the benefits of taking audio with you wherever you go, talking about the value of audio as a companion medium, as a lean-forward medium, as the medium that people pay attention to, and all of the value associated with that. And I think we need to sell that. I don't think we can assume that people are born craving audio. They're certainly born wanting to listen to music, but they're not necessarily born wanting to listen to spoken word audio. So that is what we need to sell. That is what we need to talk about. Now, increasingly, I think we need to talk about that on video platforms. Otherwise, video is going to eat us and eat the world, right? And we do not want that. I want to be retired before that happens. Please help in that goal. so I can sail off on my podcast yacht into Podcast Bay or wherever it is that I'm going to go if and when I do retire. But we need to sell the benefits of audio. We need to talk about audio as a companion, audio as a friend, audio as something that you can do and take with you when you're doing other activities, when you're commuting, when you're doing work around the home. We need to talk about that and talk about how audio has that place where video cannot and never will, so that people do, in fact, get that habit. And I think we need to talk about it on video. And that's where we are in 2025, even at an audio conference. So I apologize for bringing video into your day in a way that I have. If you would like to subscribe, we have a newsletter at Sounds Profitable. We put out new research all the time. You can scan that fancy code, which I hand drew myself this morning with a Sharpie and a piece of paper, and I made sure that it worked. But I'll stop here, and I know, Chris, you had some questions, and I'm happy to take any questions that you all have about podcasting, about audio, or anything that strikes your fancy. But thank you so much. You've been lovely. Thank you for inviting me to Madrid, to this beautiful facility, probably the biggest LCD screen I've ever seen in my life at a conference like this. But thank you for being such lovely humans.
Well, thank you indeed, Tom Webster. And I want to pick up on a couple of things you brought up, and particularly this audio advocacy point. And it seems to me that there's perceptions around there about silos, and what you have just told us is those silos have vanished, really, all but vanished, if they ever really existed. So talk about how, the perception and the reality have to be adjusted here. People will say perception is reality, but reality is reality, and the reality around the listener is that they are format agnostic. They care about content. And so for this room and for publishers and others, building bridges between these communities of content seems to be a really have a great opportunity.
Absolutely, and I think we have to meet the consumer, the hopefully listener, where they are. And that's the screen in front of them, that's the app in front of them, that's the phone in front of them, and very often it's YouTube, right? So we do have to meet the consumer where they are, but the silos have completely vanished. When I started in podcasting was a strict technical definition, right? It was the audio enclosure in an RSS file. And there are still people to this day that believe if it's not that, it's not a podcast. They can take it out of their cold, dead hands. But the consumer has left that a long time ago, and I'm not in the business of trying to correct the consumer. The consumer is always right. So does it bother me a little bit that podcast in video has kind of degraded to just mean chat show? A little bit, sure. But I think there are opportunities if we meet the consumers where they are, if we respect the consumer, that they know what they're doing, to advance audio.
And when you spoke about the YouTube app, you emphasized the engagement piece of it and the interaction possibilities. And you referred very quickly to potentially the interaction with authors, which is something I would imagine that someone like Amanda DiCiano would find a great opportunity, because you're building brands, you're engaging, and you're hopefully expanding the exposure.
Yeah, and it's not the first piece of research that I've seen or commissioned that talks about the comments section on YouTube being such a driver, because people want to feel seen. And even if it's something that they're listening to, the listener wants to feel seen. They want to feel like they matter. They want to feel some sense, potentially, of gratitude on the behalf of the creator that this listener has given them their time. And that's really, I think, what the comment section is so useful for and important for, because audio listening, especially on the apps that we typically use for audio, they're lonely places.
All right, well, that's the end of this episode with Tom Webster, which Sounds Profitable. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
That's all for now. Our producer is Jeremy Brisky of Burst Marketing, and Rob Simon is our executive producer. The Spoken World covers the latest news in the global audiobook market and features exclusive interviews with audio industry leaders, analysts, and innovators. Learn more at spokenworld.media and subscribe on all major podcast and streaming platforms. I'm Christopher Kenneally. Join me again soon on The Spoken World.